I am so sorry for being a little bit late tonight. This is Nycos Nightly News. I'm Game Master Jay, and we have a full slate again tonight. Boy, we got a lot of stuff I want to cover, and I welcome you to this channel. If you haven't been here before, I'm Jonathan Alvin, a Game Master with very nearly 50 years of roleplay experience behind the shield, and the originator and creator of the NycosRPG mechanism, and generally the source of all things knowledge-wise for the world of Nycos. Today we're going to be looking at one of the countries of Nycos that has been underserved recently, give you some update on what's going on in that kingdom. We're also going to speak something about the Order of the Veils. And I'm going to go off on a rant and maybe even give a solution for the rant, as well as I'll dive into the toolbox. So let's get started, shall we? Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the nation of Ustish. It's known as the domain of monsters, mainly because it's one of the few nations that does not have a true kingship. The emblem here that represents the heraldry is of the Order of Monster Hunters, and they operate within the realm and try to help control the overpopulation of the monstrous. These savage lands are beckoning the brave and the bold, and we do not yet have a campaign in this area of Nycos. While it is a part of the ordained world and it is adjacent to Cenobia and the nation of Nyx, Ustish is uncontrolled and rather wild. There are many airships and caravan troops that have been disappeared in the area due to the large concentration of hideous beasts and such. One thing to note is that the Stalking City, a legend in history, has been seen returning to its stomping grounds. This city on legs, if you will, does indeed move from time to time and tends to set up wherever it has opportunities to take over or dominate an area. So the return of the Stalking City to Ustish is only a precursor of what the rest of the iteration might be like. Now there are many of the hunters in the community have flocked to their winter hunting lodges. These are safe locations along the periphery of Ustish and afford the hunter and the monster seeker the opportunities to converse with others and build up strategies for actual hunting parties and such. So if your adventuring penchant is to fight monsters and kill senseless and terrible beasties, this is the place for you. As we reported last time, there was an attempt to try to tame the Grolem, and there was a training center built up for that specific purpose. But in the last couple of weeks or so, the Grolem wildlings have returned and have actually overrun that training site, liberating the dozens and possibly hundreds of Grolem that were being maintained there. And so this is called into question whether or not the Grolem are coordinated warriors and therefore should be given wider berth, or whether they are truly just collective monstrosities that seem to be banding together a bit more than in the past. History will carry this forward one way or the other in the future, but at this point it's just rumors that suggest that they might be working together. Pardon me for moving the mic. Just realized that I'm probably not being heard as well as I could be. Alrighty, the next is that the basalt ziggurat apparently was the epicenter of a Nycos quake in the last few days, and this does not bode well, suggestive of possible problems in the protection and defensive facilities within the ziggurat. So it has been requested that party members from any group that receives this message may consider at least making a pass by this historic edifice to see what they can do to ensure its security. The next story to bring up is the fact that the Western Voice has been heard, and it may be actually beginning its first hunt. As you may or may not know, the voices are representative of the 4 largest of the draconic beings that live on Nycos, and these predate this iteration, which means they've been here for quite some time. The fact that the Western Voice has been heard suggests that there may be something that is interfering with their normal sleep cycle, or there may actually be incursions from the Everdark. Another note is that the Cenobian operatives that were being held in the last few weeks have been found dead in their cells. It's suggested that someone has broken in and eliminated them, or perhaps provided them a means to prevent themselves from being compromised. But we don't know that much about them yet, but they are definitely no longer alive. The Capranarian that was announced last news story as taking the primary role within the Ustish's Hunters Guilds is William Cloghopper, and he's raising questions about the efficacy of the material trades, and so is looking to perhaps increase the number of caravans through Ustish. This may be indeed a part of a wider expansion of the concept of Ustish as becoming a 3rd sect-gen homeland, but we don't have any details on it yet. Now, it is also interesting to note that the city of Nyx has done what is relatively unthinkable, and that is they have turned back the Ustish delegation, claiming that they don't want to do any business with the Friends of Monsters. So this may also lead to a widening of the distrust between North and South, but we will carry that forward in the next report. Alrighty. On a separate note, we're going to talk a little bit about the Veils, the Order of the Veils. As you can see in our easy-to-use guide here, you can see the relationship between the various Veils and the others within the collective Order of the Veils. But Carolus is the one we're going to focus on today. This is the Blue Veil, the Veil of Protection. Not only in terms of preventing harm, the Carolinians adhere to concepts that one should not interfere with the status quo. They should not interfere with things they do not understand. Their collective battle cry is, "Don't push any of the buttons." Followers of the Blue Veil advocate for stability and stalwart maintenance of the status quo. They prefer things to remain as they are, and because of this, they are often in the middle of frays, not because they oppose one side or the other, but rather that they're trying to prevent the loss of life and the destruction of the peace and tranquility that most enjoy. Magic effects that are produced by the Carolinians includes protective magics and preventive ones, things that would alleviate suffering and would bring things back to a center point. When perception suggests that changes might happen, the Carolinians are going to intercede and provide negotiated and enforced balance in all things whenever possible. All right, now we're going to move on to my rant for this week. You see, as a game master, one thing I've noted is that it seems like we can't have nice things when it comes to role-play games. The game masters either are lackluster or don't focus on their players, but instead focus on the mechanics of the game, the fairness of the rules and such like. And we'll get more into that in a minute, but the basic idea is that they've, for the most part, beaten the tropes to death. The idea of a storyline that is familiar and feels acceptable or normal has been played over and over again to the point where it's no longer enjoyable. As a matter of fact, many players have cited to me that the game sessions that they are in are boring, that they are the same old every session. And there's definitely problems with such a condition, and we need to do what we can to break people out of this mold. Next thing is that role playing has been replaced with role playing. In other words, storytellers have gotten to the point where they don't even attempt to engage the players in the concept of playing a role, but instead choosing to use dice rolling mechanisms to overplay and overdo the scenes that could have been easier done through role play and would have perhaps arguably been more enjoyable. This is partially because the players as a whole are becoming less focused on role play and are becoming more focused on player character advancement. But it also tends to relate to the game masters being unable to carry on a conversation in the role of a persona. And this is kind of critical. But this is actually, I believe, in my case, I believe it's a result of the backstories taking over the position of importance in adventure paths. The players, when they build a rather in-depth backstory, take from the game master and the other players the opportunity to be a part of a story, but instead are only being held to the light of the perfection of the backstory in terms of quality, and therefore, since you are comparing with the perfect done in a vacuum, it's making it more and more difficult to play an adventure path that the players can see as useful or interesting because they've already built it into their backstories. Furthermore, the elemental framework for RPGs has changed. Where it used to be a group of players taking on roles that they were unfamiliar with and learning how to work together as a team, it is becoming increasingly a group of wish-fulfilling NPCs that the players are backing, who are trying to achieve whatever goals the players have set, and the game master has fundamentally been relegated to a back seat. This is partially because the players have become imitative in their nature. They see something on a movie and they want to fulfill that for themselves, or they have a concept that they want to promote in their own way, and so therefore they force the game masters to actually act as line judges, only keeping the other players in the scene, so to speak, for the purposes of showing off or promoting the storyline as the players have defined it. Furthermore, the very concept of game mechanics has become full circle. When they were originally started, the intention was to downplay the mechanics and build up the playing of the roles and for the personas to become dynamic and interactive, and now it's back to which dice do I roll and what kind of a result does it give me towards my objective. Now, all of this also plays, I wouldn't say it plays into the hands, but it definitely supports the hands of publishers who are trying to streamline the mechanism to the point where the player awards are becoming blandified. If your award to your players in-game is a unique item, it's actually a detriment to them because they can't immediately click a button and include it in their inventory, and therefore they don't get to see the value of that item because they can visually see the items that are on the manufacturer's approved list, which of course fundamentally is destroying the concept of creativity and innovation. And finally, the player agency is being undermined because the number of options and decisions that the player can make are being seriously restricted by the use of VTT in lieu of narrative, conversation-based theater of the mind. And this player agency that's being lost isn't even noted by the players because many of them are already familiar with video games and are used to the idea that what they have as options are already limited. So it's really just a change up in the game mechanics that is causing this undermining action. So I'm rather agitated about why we can't have nice things. So I'm going to now go over and talk a little bit about how the Nycos RPG and the Imagination Launchpad can give back at least some of these benefits. The first thing is that I want you to consider the idea of your role-playing session as being a video game in the marketplace, with the idea that you're able to save the game from time to time. And when I say benefits of a saved game, I'm actually talking about how, if you can redeem it from that video games marketplace and make it more innovative, there are several benefits of this process of saving a game from that fate. First one is that the storytellers have to step up. We as game masters have to create innovation. We have to make the stories dynamic. We have to be inclusive for anybody that wants to be a participant. We have to find ways to make the ideas that the players come up with important. This leads to, of course, decisions that matter, both for the game master and the player. If you are creating as you go instead of just replicating, then now the things that a person does will matter to the advancement of the group. Well, these two things alone will lead to improved interaction, because you're going to be engaging with NPCs that are what the game master has created. They're going to be the people that he wants you to meet, and therefore give you a better ebb and flow of the game. If the items are not streamlined, if the locations are not cookie cutter, then you get a improved sense of wonder and mystery, and that improvement makes your game dynamically more fun. It's a benefit of actually breaking free of the mold. Furthermore, if the players interact collectively in roleplay, then they develop a new concept of team play. They're no longer just working on what their individual character advancement would be, but they're able to build their characters forward in a collective. And this leads to a much more uniform, serialized campaign. Now, this purpose of going to a serialized campaign allows for the monitored advancement that many game masters deem necessary. But in a game like NycosRPG, it provides even more innovation, because the players can take the collective concepts and move them around. And both lead to a more cinematic engagement, because the players are actually bringing forth the story, not just the storyteller. All of this leads, therefore, to memorable moments. The things that happen in-game are going to be things that the players brought to the table, they invoked, and the game master worked into the story. And this provides not only memorable moments, but a very deep sense of belonging to the group. And by all these elements, your play sessions will improve. So you see, you want to move away from a cookie cutter, routine, mundane game session and move to a much more operable, saved game environment. Okay, last but not least for this episode, we're going to have a bit of a resources and assets discussion. In reality, a role-play game, the secret sauce of the role-play game is what the game master brings to the table. Now, in almost every case, the players have an idea of what game is being played, and the game's rules guides are an essential resource for the game master. If the play is going to be following the guidelines of the system, then that means that the play needs to be understood by all players, and the engagement in the game will follow the lore and tropes that are accepted within that game master's assets. The next thing is that the game masters need to develop planned encounters. I know this is one that kind of flies in the face of what I call seat of the pants game mastering, but the idea here is that you need to have 2 or 3 ideas about what will happen in a game session, so that there is a way to lead them or guide them into those interactions. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not, but the players are going to be bringing into the game some forms of coherent randomness. They're going to be choosing what areas to enter, and therefore you have to, as a game master, have an idea of what kinds of encounters they might run into, what kind of monsters are going to be present, what kinds of weather might they encounter. All these different things are fundamentally a means for the storyteller to add applied chaos to his game, so it feels like it's random and yet it's coherent. It makes sense for what's going on. I remember one of the biggest challenges to the older wandering monster tables is they very rarely described creatures that would have been mobile, but instead were speaking as if your wandering encounter was the adventurers wandering instead of the creatures. And a coherent randomness chart will be showing those monsters and those creatures that might be moving in an area, and therefore bring it back to a more cogent reality, and it'll feel more like a real life. The game master also has to be pretty familiar with the theme that he's trying to play into, as well as the specific setting that he's placed before the group. Because if he doesn't have that familiarity, he'll come off as a disconnected or unaware game master, and that's not a good thing. So by developing and maintaining a good dynamic feel for your theme and setting, you allow your players to be able to push against that in their own development, and therefore create a richer sense of not only the theater of the mind, but this idea that you are in a scene, in a place. It's also important that the game master has the right dice for the occasion. Certain games lend themselves to percentile dice, while others require d20s or other madness. But the idea here is make sure that whatever system you're going to use, the dice are available for all players, so that there's no break in the timeline as people go digging for what they really should have had with them. Another thing that really plays well into making your game sessions exciting and such is that you have a rational naming convention. If the creatures in an area are from the same nationality, then their names should be of a similar type. It's a kind of a unspoken rule that if you're going to name creatures, then you're going to name them all similarly, because it makes it easier for the players to be able to see where the line is between one group of NPCs and another. So this is really important, is to have this. There are plenty of examples that I can provide that would really help to maintain this level of stability. Additionally, you need to have some idea of how to scale adventures and create alternative courses. Players will never play the story as you intended. It's just not feasible. Instead, they're going to build what they see out of the pieces that you provide them. And so by being able to adjust and modify the course and increase or decrease the scale as the players drive it, these tools literally give your players the opportunity to test their wings and see what's involved. And then finally, one of the greatest inclusion in your game setup is to maintain the direct influence on your secret weapon, and that is your players. If you have a situation that you require to go physical, then certainly put the players who have that penchant on the game at that moment. If there is a situation where you want a shared communication, then certainly have your talkers among the group be the ones that are included in the scenes. It's pretty important that the game master knows that there will be a mismatch if these aren't adhered to or this concept isn't employed. And so you can actually improve your game session over session simply by recognizing which players you have engaging with which condition. Alrighty, so I've completed my list of properties here. I want to thank you for spending your time with me. I'm Jonathan Alvin, Game Master J, and this has been Nycos Nightly News and NycosRPG. I want to thank you for being here, and we will see you next time. Remember, we're on air every night at 11 p.m. Pacific time, and we bring a wide array of different things to talk about, and we'd love to hear from you. If you haven't yet, please make sure you follow the channel so you can know when we're going to be broadcasting next. And if you get a chance, go over to youtube.com at NycosRPG and join us and subscribe there so you'll be updated whenever anything new comes up. This is Jonathan Albin, Game Master J, and I thank you again for being here. See you next time.